Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Custom Knife Factory and Tony Marfione Sokosha. Very, very cool. So, like many CKF knives, I am thoroughly confused by, how many options there were, the availability, things like that. I'm going to do my best to get as much information about this knife to you as possible. And then we're definitely going to talk about the knife. Thank you so much to the gentleman who sent this in. Let me borrow it for a review. And that's going to be Slant Rhyme Knives on Instagram. Please give him a follow. It's because of people like him that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. It's also because of my generous patrons. Thanks for supporting me. There's a link for Patreon right down below. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Okay, so I don't know if these were officially an NC Blade exclusive. It seems like that's where the vast majority of people, at least, were picking these up. There were, to my knowledge, a couple different variants of this knife, and that's going to be exactly what you're seeing here. And then also exactly what you're seeing here, except instead of a two-tone blade, I believe there was a hand-rubbed satin finished version of this. I think all of these, now, I'm sorry, people are quickly pointing. There was another version, yeah, there was or is going to be, or I don't know, a super expensive version of this knife that was all zirconium or very close, all zirconium and zircotite and some partially mirror polished blade. I don't know. That one's really expensive. I'm sure it was a super limited run. As far as these, the normal versions, I think they all came pre-equipped with a very beautiful, let me shine this up for you guys, very beautiful zircotite, Chad Nichols zircotite pocket clip. And then they also came with a standard clip. I don't think you can get this knife with, because a lot of people are going to know right off the bat, that's probably a huge chunk of the price tag, right? Yeah. I don't think you could get this knife with just the standard titanium clip. I think you kind of had to buy the zircotite clip. So that's as far as I know. I could very well be wrong, but we are proceeding with this review as if that is the case. So Sokosha, why do they call it that? Well, Tony Marfione designed the SOCOM, which we're all very familiar with. And then there's another model called the Makosha Veshka, which was designed by, it's either Malyshev Anton or Anton Malyshev. And I'm so sorry for number one, likely mispronunciation of the name, and number two, I'm not sure what order that is. I think this is the gentleman behind a lot of the designs from CKF. I don't know that for sure, but there's some information for you. So yeah, Sokosha, the combination of the two, right? And I can tell you right off the bat, you pick this thing up and the first thing you're gonna think of is the Microtech SOCOM Elite. It has that feeling, right? Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. This is a big knife. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2, which was way over there. Sorry about that. So, yeah, it's definitely bigger than the Rat. How much bigger? Well, we probably should have measured it first. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Sorry, sometimes I forget. Overall length of the Sokosha coming in. If you go back to the butt of the titanium, it's about 8.25, maybe 8.3. If you want to go all the way to the glass breaker, 8.5 inches. Blade length, about 3.6, cutting edge, about 3.35. Anyways, up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Definitely bigger than both, a little bit bigger. And let's do the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Outs. Finally, I think a good one would be the actual SOCOM Elite. You can see the similarities. The SOCOM Elite is still bigger, but yeah, it's definitely, like, this has Marfione written, figuratively written all over it, literally written in one place. But yeah, definitely you can see the influence there. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. We'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is a T25, which I love. I love massive fasteners on pocket knives. It's excellent. The pivot is free spinning, but it's tight enough that like friction will allow you to, you know, tighten it up. Like the tolerances are very, very good on this. Would it have been better if they had a captive pivot? Absolutely. But as far as I know, this is a free spinning pivot. You just kind of give it a little crank and it'll loosen up. And then sometimes you kind of, it's one of those you just put your finger on it and tighten it or loosen it. It's gonna give. And then the rest of these screws, I'm not gonna check them. I already know. These are all T8. Even the screws holding in the countersunk steel liner lock, everything's T8. There's a few extra pieces of hardware that I normally liked, but but it's like I always say, I'd rather have extra hardware and have them all be T8 or bigger than have minimal hardware and have them be T6 or smaller. So I don't really care. Let's go ahead and talk about, first off, I'll give you guys a look at the action. The action's pretty good. It's kind of a wiggle shut knife, right? But it's consistent, not feeling anything that feels like subpar, right? And it's likely one of those knives that will break in as that detent ball wears a race into the face of the blade tang. It will likely get smoother and smoother and smoother. It's not as drop shut as some other CKFs that right? This isn't going to be like the Snafu or I don't know, what was it, the Rotten. It's not quite as smooth as that right off the bat, but I'm sure that over time, as you sit on the couch and flick it, it's gonna smooth out. But no, the action is plenty high quality for what you're gonna pay, which is quite a bit. I'm plenty happy with the action. Carry profile, should have done this in a different order as well. It's a little bit thicker than the Spyderco Para 3. Not insane. We're not talking about Medford thickness. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. Body-wise, we're looking at about the same as the PM2. Definitely longer than the Para 3. Not as tall, though. The humps on the PM2 and Para 3 are still higher than the maximum height of this because this is, it's not, doesn't have a flipper tab or anything like that. It's just thumb studs. Okay, let's see here. How about weight? What are we looking at for materials? We are looking at an M390 blade, like I said, two-tone or hand-rubbed satin for the standard versions you'll find out there that aren't the super crazy, ultra expensive version of this knife. Titanium for the scales. We have beautiful, they're like textured carbon fiber inlays here. Nice work on that. And then of course the Zircotai, which is zirconium infused titanium Damascus for the pocket clip. We have a steel countersunk liner lock, which is fine. Why not titanium with a steel lock bar insert? I don't know. I don't think it needed to be that. Still going to be a fairly heavy knife. Not insane, though. 5.22 ounces, right? Before anybody complains about that, let's weigh the SOCOM Elite in aluminum. Just barely lighter. This knife really, it's like in my mind, I've always like, I wonder what it would feel like to have a titanium SOCOM. That's kind of what this feels like, right? So, ratios are not perfect. This is a big knife, though. 5.22 ounces isn't insane, but it's not like, if you're like big on the ratios and the balance and all that, then no, this isn't, it's not going to have that stuff, right? Moving on here, let's measure blade stock thickness. Where are those calipers? There they are right there. This looks to be, I'm going to guess about 150 thousandths, maybe. Maybe it's thicker than that. I don't know. Let's find out. I almost always get this wrong just by looking at it. No, you know what? Today I think we're going to be pretty close. It's probably about 155 thousandths. It's a bigger knife. Does it need to be that thick? I don't know. The edge does come down to a very, very thin final cutting edge. So I don't know that I'm really too bent out of shape about that. I think that's pretty much it. Should we move into the meat and potatoes here? Yeah. So here's something that I really like about CKF knives. You get the, you get the pouch. I don't really care. Like, people, it always cracks me up when people are like, I spent all this money on a knife and it just came with a cardboard box. For that much money, at least the packaging. Why do you care? Are you going to carry the box around with you? Like, I've bought expensive knives that just come wrapped in some brown paper, and I'm like, okay, fine. And then, is it nice to get some, like an authenticity card or something like that? A little bit of, well, okay, sure, right? But as far as like the packaging or the box or the pouch or what, I don't collect that stuff. That's like obligatory thing. Those are obligatory things that take up space because they're part of the knife. And for whatever reason, people are just like, does it have the buck? Like, I get it. I asked for it too, right? But it's because I know if I ever get rid of it, like that's what people want. I think it's a silly thing. In any case, you do get a nice pouch, right? You get the authenticity card. You can see here, this is number 220, made in 2022. A lot of twos on there. There's all the information, et cetera, some hashtags. You get the cleaning, the napkin, and then you get the much more important, in my opinion, is extra hardware. Look at the bearings. Yeah. Those will wear in a nice smooth race over time. You get an extra pivot, whole bunch of extra screws. There's an extra, sorry, I'm trying to move. Yeah. The extra, like the, where it's so that the ceramic bearings are not contacting titanium, the steel washers, right? Awesome. And then there's the regular titanium clip if you want to, if you want to take this out and you don't want to beat up on the beautiful zircotite part, right? Then they don't make you fuss with it. They just give you this clip, right? They also force you to buy, they're also forcing you to pay for that zircotite clip. There are plenty of people who probably would love to have this knife and are like, zircotite doesn't do anything for me and that stuff's expensive, so I'm just paying that extra cost in the cost of the knife. Yeah, you are. That's part of it. We'll talk about this. Ergonomically, love the entire handle, but I gotta admit, that pocket clip is the first thing that you feel when you grab onto it. It's not the worst hotspot in the world, but it's obvious. I think it would have been a lot more expensive to do a 3D milled, like sort of contoured or just flattened out Timascus clip that did not have this dip and then the rise and then this very angular, right? It's not sharp, but you're gonna notice it. It's not terrible, right? If you were gonna work with this thing for a while without gloves, that's the part of your hand that's gonna wear down, right? That's probably the part of your hand that's going to wear down first anyway, regardless of the shape of the clip, but that's what you're going to feel. Edges, very nicely knocked down. Nothing super angular or pointy at all. Even the glass breaker is just a little ball bearing thing. This is one of those clips that can be flip-flopped, and so lefties, right, you can enjoy this knife. And honestly, right, I am right-handed, but you can see here, I'm really not having any trouble manipulating this knife with either hand, and that's because access to this lock bar, while it is not cut out right here, this space is wide enough because the blade is thick, right? It's just how the construction ended up. The space is wide enough that you really can still approach it from the side, even though normally I like to see the show side scale cut out a bit deeper so that you can kind of have that going across access to the liner lock, but it doesn't really need it. Detent on this guy is tuned perfectly for a thumb stud opener. It's very satisfying to deploy. In fact, it's very similar to the feeling of the SOCOM. The SOCOM still has that louder, like this thing is, super well known for it's very authoritative, right? Which is just silly. Like, I'm going to announce my authority. Like it's kind of dumb. Yeah, it sounds cool. And this is it has that. I think the titanium just doesn't quite have the resounding thwack of the aluminum, but it does have that, right? It's a very satisfying deployment feeling and sound. And it's very easy to do your rear kick, right? Or your middle finger flick, whatever you want to call that, the reverse flick. Yeah, these are short, fat, wide, little textured thumb studs, which is how thumb studs should never be pointy, angry little peaks, right? Like the one on the Sebenza. People always defending the Sebenza. Those suck. Sorry, those are terrible. Well, there's a perfect example of what thumb studs should never be. Little pointy, little, the thing in. Here's what they are. The thing in Super Mario 3, when you get to World 5 and you have to go to that weird peach-colored spirally castle to get up to the cloud zone, right? Remember what that thing looks like on the map? That's what the Chris Reeve thumb studs are. Ew. Moving on. The titanium, all of this looks great. I love this little area in here. It's very similar to, the area in the SOCOM, right? They kind of carved that out. The scales themselves, this is not perfectly flat. It's ever so slightly contoured, right? Chamfered in some areas, really nice. The black hardware looks great with the bronze. I would have preferred, me personally, I would have preferred like a darkened, tumbled titanium version. I don't know why they were just like, it's going to be bronze, but okay, it was. And then we have the carbon fiber inlay work looks fantastic, and it's also, very similar to, how we've got this the TrackTech inserts in the SOCOM Elite. Really like that, and super high quality too. It's a little bit lower than the titanium. They didn't make it flush. I think that kind of looks nice. Something to point out here, because I'm sure people are like, I can see voids in the carbon fiber. Here, we'll zoom in so we can take a look. I'm not trying to hide these. This is the name of the game with this type of carbon fiber, right? The shred or the marble stuff. You're just gonna get little voids here and there, right? It's not. There are always gonna be people who are, I have this or that, and I don't have any voids. It's luck of the draw, right? But the nature of the beast with this type of carbon fiber is you might have some voids. Is it a big deal? No, not really. I don't really care, right? If you're insisting on buying a knife that where the entirety of the scales are marble or shred carbon fiber or something similar, right? You're kind of rolling the dice, right? In a lot of cases, it's going to have at least a few voids. So I don't know. I don't really care. I don't judge this stuff all that much, right? I also personally don't buy knives that are entirely made of shred or marble or have huge chunks of it, because the bigger the piece, the more likely you're going to see that. This has a couple of inlays. I don't really care. The rest of it's titanium, right? The blade looks great. It's kind of a super aggressive, elongated clip points. Maybe some people say Persian, whatever you want to call this is fine with me. There's a flat that carries out about 45% the length of the blade, and it's got quite a bit of room to drop down towards to a very, very thin final apex. The cutting edge is razor sharp, and that thing is ready to go. Because of where the sharpening choil is, actually the thumb studs clear the cutting path. So you can get pretty darn close to the cutting edge, and there's a lot of razor sharp knife edge and belly to do whatever it is that you're going to do. Nice tip as well. But there's plenty of robustness, right? With that 155 thousandths stock thick blade. It's pretty all purpose, right? I mean, yeah, I know, right? Well, you can't pry the door off a tank with it, right? Like my Becker BK2. Well, okay. But that's not really what you should do with a folding knife. So realm of reason here is what I'm getting at. Real nice, though. I would have preferred the satin finish. If I was going to pick this, which truthfully I would have, I guess I was just like not paying attention. I remember when this was announced and I was like, wow, neat. I'll have to remember to get those. And then I blinked and I was like, when are those oh, they're gone. And I know a lot of you right now are going, yeah, that's pretty much my experience with CKF stuff. You really need to be following them and paying attention to everything that they do and say to, know when things are going to drop. Sometimes it's like, hey, we already made these and they're going to drop on this date and they're going to go pretty quick. So here we go. And sometimes they're like, hey, we're doing a pre-order. You put a down payment down and your knife will be ready in a year. That's just how it is. They're not, these are not made in such massive supply that you can go to their site and just pick one out like a Spyderco Manix 2. Why not? Because that's just the way that it is. Stuff like this is not stamped and pressed like knives that are, and also they're not, like Spyderco's a massive company, right? If you want that type of selection, Benchmade, Spyderco, CRKT, right? Some like a lot of the budget stuff, like those are, that's what this is not the same. We're not talking about the same type of company. They have massive demand and cannot create fast enough, cannot do enough of these, right? That's a capacity issue. A lot of people say it's artificial scarcity in their control. No, it's a capacity thing, right? We could argue that day and night. From my perspective, it's a capacity type of deal. But anyways, yeah, I would have gone with the satin finish blade. I thought that the hand rub satin finish looked better than the two-tone. Two-tone always looks a little bit tactical to me, which is people would say, well, that's funny. Like you're looking at, you know, a knife that was designed by someone who's arguably the king of tactical, Anthony Marfione. Okay, fair enough. I can't really, I can't really complain too much there. Yeah, I also like that the thumb studs are blade stops, just like in the SOCOM. I like that. Why? It adds a little bit more stability. It's easier to get the action the way that you want it, or have it break in really smooth. And then when it locks out, because you have multiple, you know, points of contact, multiple points of surface contact, you get that solidity, that feeling of solidity in the lockout while still having pretty darn smooth action, which is nice. And if you're gonna be cutting and twisting into dense material, it does mitigate some pressure away from the pivot, which is the weakest point of any pocket knife. So, right, at least a feeling of, you know, extra fortification in your knife. I like it. I also like how around the pivot, like it sort of has this ring where the titanium sort of comes up to a lip. I really like that look. I think it looks nice. They could have just had it come right up to the edge and just, you know, just end, but it doesn't. There's a lanyard thing. So there you go, lanyard folks. Sorry, I've gotten so dismissive of that. If you're new to my channel, I don't care about lanyards. I hate lanyard holes. I think they are a waste of space in all but, you know, like circumstantially, maybe like 1% of circumstances. I think universally the solution is just to mill a slot on the backspacer and put like a little bar or a little hole back here so that it is permanently in second place in terms of priority behind the pocket clip, which is a much more important element. Fortunately, the design of this is great. It bypasses the lanyard hole completely, so we don't have to worry about where it is, right? And it just mounts to the top of it. So the position of the pocket clip and carry depth, I think, are really, really good. And honestly, getting it, you know, over your pants is not going to be much of a... They did this thing where it's like a flat bill, but it's pretty high up off the titanium, so in and out of the pocket should be pretty easy. It's also a smooth surface here, so that's nice. They insisted on the glass breaker, which is kind of... It's almost like it just has to be there because it's a, you know, because it's a Marfione. But okay, like I've never needed it, you know, maybe in one situation in my entire life that I've not experienced yet, I'll need a glass breaker, and I'll be lucky enough to be carrying something like this, and maybe I'll change my perspective, right? I don't know. Glass breakers for the most part to me are just more of an eyesore than anything. But I guess it's not really hurting that much. It's just there. And then it's also the screw that's holding it. Here's the thing. Here's what would be easier, and I know that you can get these. If you want to change the position of the clip, you kind of have to like unscrew. Oh, I was about to say, oh, it's going to be so hard to unscrew. I did it with my hands, right? So you got to unscrew this. I'm glad that they did not, you know, Loctite the crap out of that. You unscrew that, and then you flip the pocket clip over, and then you screw it back down. What would have been easier is just another large screw that you could have gone at with a Torx driver, securing it better than just with your hands. You can use you could use a Leatherman, and I would suggest using like a cloth or something so you don't mark up the glass breaker. You could, if you really want to crank that down and make sure that the pocket clip stays secure. But anyways, a screw would have been better. This side, much the same as the front, except that it has the screws for, you know, the mounting of the countersunk steel liner lock, which is great, by the way. I'm really glad that they did that and not an exposed frame lock. Why? I've explained it many times. With the lock bar being completely and totally shielded by, in this case, titanium, instead of being exposed in something like a frame lock, right? Like this. You can put your fingers wherever you want when you deploy it. You don't have to worry, oh, am I putting too much pressure on that lock bar? I don't know. Yeah, you don't have to do that. You can also squeeze the thing as hard as you want during use, and you'll never affect the lockup percentage or geometry between the lock bar and the blade tang, right? So that's cool. This is a wonderfully designed knife. And outside of the glass breaker thing and the pocket clip shape, it's pretty good. Like I'd still give the pocket clip like a B. It's all right. The design of the knife is excellent. If you really did want to, a lot of people are still on it. Probably nobody ever uses knives that are that expensive. Yes, they do. Right? That's people who say that are just sitting in a little box going, Well, I feel like my brain tells me that's just kind of a crazy concept that people would buy an expensive knife and use it. I've done no additional research out of just thinking that right here and now in this moment. So I'm just going to say that, I'm just going to go ahead and conclude that that's factually true. No, that's wrong. If you think that, that's incorrect. Most people, at least from my perspective, talking with tens of thousands of people a year, most people who end up buying stuff like this end up buying a lot of stuff like this. And then they inevitably end up using it. It's actually quite the opposite. As somebody who collects expensive knives, I can tell you, yeah, I have Safe Queens, but I also have users that are really expensive, right? You just eventually it eats away at you and you get curious. You're like, what would it be like to carry and use something like this? And then you just start using it. A lot of people say, well, that's crazy because eventually you're going to lose it. No, you're more likely to lose an inexpensive knife because you are not subconsciously concerned with it. If you have something like this in your pocket, you're way less likely to misplace it or lose it or something like that or break it because you're going to be subconsciously more careful with it. You just are. You're going to use it like a knife, but you're going to go, hey, before I throw my pants in the dryer, right, or take my, whatever, leave them wherever I probably should get my super expensive knife out of it and put it in a safe place, right? That's more likely going to be. So if you're new and you see stuff like that, that's mostly nonsense people are just making up in their head. But yeah, super cool knife. You're going to take this out and use it. This is a great tool. Fantastic. Price. So the price on these, as far as I can tell, was $590. At least 100 of that, judging by what I've seen Zircotai pocket clips go for, $100 is probably in the clip, right? So the thing that bothers me is what they usually do is they're like, you can buy this knife, and then if you want to buy like the cool Timascus clip and backspacer upgrade, or just the clip, right? Then you can pay, between $100 and $150, sometimes $180 for whatever, right? You can do that. Some people do it, some people don't. That's how they should have done this. We should have had the option with just the titanium clip, and then, it would have come out to about $500. Truthfully, this feels like about a $450 knife, right? That's what it feels like to me. Knowing likely what it costs to manufacture something like this in Russia, even if they do have some outsourced parts, which I honestly don't know, right? It seems to be the case. But doing something like this to this level of quality, this is absolutely in a tier above your standard, right? Like this is definitely way nicer than like a ZT knife, way nicer than a Wii or a Bestech. Feels more along the lines of, if we're going to compare it to a Chinese OEM, it's more along the lines of something that I expect from Riot, which is, they're definitely a few steps up from some of those other brands that I mentioned. This level of quality, that's about the zone that I'm thinking, right? But no, it was $590. Is it worth it? Well, if you really, really love Zircotai, like for me personally, yes, I do. What would have made this ideal for me, either a hand rub satin finished blade or a tumbled blade, not this two-tone thing, an option for just a gray, so I get kind of that monochromatic body look and then have the spice in the clip, right? It's weird that they only offered it in two configurations, and it was, or at least the standard ones, and it was just either two-tone or hand rub satin finish. But the design is great. Pocket clip's okay. Don't need the glass breaker. If you really like really like Zircotai and you're happy to pay for it, then sure, $590, okay, right? But outside of that, it was just going to be a really high price. It doesn't really matter because the thing sold out like super fast. I hope they do more of these in the future, which honestly wouldn't surprise me if they did. I just hope that we have more options next time. And I hope that we don't have to. For me, it's fine. Like if they offer this again, like I would want the clip anyway. So I'm like, yeah, here's my money. But I know that there's plenty of you out there who don't need that, right? This is an unnecessary embellishment. So I hope that they do versions of this. For all I know, they could have offered a version of this without that clip, and I just wasn't aware. But it's everything that I dug up, every listing, right, that I saw, well, I think it was all kind of went back to the same listing, but all the information I could find suggested that it automatically came with the clip. So I think if they offered a standard version of this knife at about $450, it would really scream pretty good deal, right? Pretty good deal, right? Scream it. But I do like this. I think this is a good knife. It's hard for me to like openly recommend it in this form because you have to, as far as I know, you have to buy that Zircotai clip with it. But it is really cool. In any case, this is definitely one of the nicer, like more interesting knives that have come across my table. And yeah, I really do like the design on this. This is going to make it into my favorite knives ever playlist. This is just, I like this a lot. I'm a little confused with the, the logic behind the you have to buy the clip thing. Anyways, I hope that, there's a lot of information to, like reviewing this type of stuff. There's a lot of info and it's not always easy to get. It's not always clear. Sometimes you get different information from different sources and things, right? And it's not always super easy to reach out to the people behind this stuff. I'm not saying that they don't communicate. I'm saying, they're busy. So it's not always easy. Anyways, very cool. Not something that's for everybody, but definitely one of the coolest knives I've ever reviewed. So thanks again to the person who sent this in for me to take a look at. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.